Hello everyone, this is Scrapyard Studios, and today we will be covering facts on Thomas Logic. But for this episode, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Jackson, otherwise known as Mr. Slowking64. This has honestly been a long time coming, so with introductions out the way, I'll let Jackson take it away.
Hello everyone, this is Mr. Slowking64, and today we will be covering facts on Thomas Logic. Without further ado, let's begin. Fact 1. The short explanation behind the events of the Flying Kipper is that
they couldn't know the points from the main line to the siding were frozen and that the signal had been set at danger. A fall of snow had forced it down.
However, the more in-depth explanation is this.
What actually had happened was it was frozen ballast. When he had released the point lock and he had pulled the point lever to change the points, the ballast was frozen and actually it was causing resistance in the mechanism. Those points never moved, which is why the point locking mechanism could go back into place, because it was still in its original position.
So the signalman did change the points correctly. However, the facing point was prevented by the ballast, not just snow and ice.
Fact 2. The reasoning for every runaway involving trucks in the railway's earliest days is not just down to the behaviour of the trucks, but also the engineering of the trucks. A vast majority of the NWR stock, and also Britain by extension, were almost never fitted, meaning that the driver of the engine had no control over the wagon brakes. In cases like Thomas and the trucks or Percy's predicament, the trucks have free will, and while the loco's crew can't control their braking system on the move, they can whenever they please. The only control the crew do have is stopping the train and individually pinning down the brakes on each wagon one by one. And additionally, this is why the Kipper doesn't need a brake van, as the vans on that train are fully fitted.
Fact 3. The reason Dalby's Percy debacle was such a big deal was because, in addition to his disinterest in trains, resulting in many errors, Reginald failed to grasp on what Percy actually is, which is a saddle tank engine. Like with Bill, Ben, Wilbert, and so on, the term saddle tank derives from the saddle of the horse, and how the saddle can, of course, be taken off the horse. Later, artists would thankfully illustrate Percy how he should look, with his tank being a separate component as opposed to it being drawn as his whole fucking body.
Fact 4. Bill and Ben are very small engines, even when compared to trucks. They're this small because of their line of work, being for, of course, China clay. They were built for the primary purpose of going in and out of very small tunnels and mine shafts, which of course isn't something fit for Edward with his much taller stature.
Fact 5. In the story Super Rescue, Henry's regulator is jammed open, yet he can still stop and change direction. Seems a bit nonsensical, right? Well, no. I'll let Luke explain.
The difference is the regulator is literally just the go stick. Like, that doesn't determine direction or you're stopping. If it's open, you've got steam travelling through the valves, and obviously you don't want to have it open when you stop them, but in theory you can, because your reverser, which is what determines forward or backwards or mid-gear, that, tells you where you want to go. And the further you take it back, if you would, because like if you put your reverser in full forward, you're going to be using all of the steam that's going through the system. If you pull it back to a little bit, you're not going to be using as much steam, and you'll go slower. If you're going slower, but you won't use as much. So that's what's being used in the story.
So long story short, it's the reverser that dictates direction, whereas it's the regulator that flows steam to the cylinders.
Fact 6. It's never really been specified how twins work with engines. Sharing the same class is one thing, sure, but what about identical twins? The real logic behind this, at least the way I see it, is that identical twins are two engines of the same class that are constructed and completed at the same time. Considering how commercial and necessary the need of locomotives was back in the day, this would have most definitely been a common thing.
Fact 7. In regard to what Henry's design was, there's been an interesting theory that explains why he's so flawed.
There is another chap who you might not know about, is Henry Greenley, who was a designer of 15-inch gauge locomotives, and a lot of his designs were based on that of Sir Nigel Gresley's. And they were, I'm right in saying they were, friends, weren't they?
They were friends, yeah.
We kind of propose that Henry Greenley had sketched up designs for a locomotive a Pacific type, that he'd heard around the time that his friend Sir Nigel was also designing a Pacific as well. So took his drawings in to discuss notes and compare ideas. And of course he left his drawings at Doncaster because he was like, oh, we'll go down to the pub, we'll come back and let them later. And this was in 1919, and as we all know, a scandal happened at Doncaster, and a spy or a worm from someone who had a grudge against Sir Nigel Gresley
Jeremiah Jobling
stole some plans from Doncaster Works.
Of course, this is, as said before, just a theory. However, the additional knowledge of the drawings being for a much smaller gauge totally makes sense considering
The other engines can manage. They've got big fireboxes, but Henry's is small and can't make the heat.
Fact 8. The show never clarified this, but mainline diesels never need a turntable as they have a cab at either end. Additionally, this is why they have two faces in the books. It's because they don't need to turn around. Unless you're Toby and just don't give a shit when Spong draws you, but you know, we're not going to get into that.
Fact 9. Midland locos like the Coronation had a special mechanism in their tenders called coal pushers. Its purpose is self-explanatory, and assuming it's not just an express thing, Henry would likely need one for his trips to Manchester with the Kipper.
Fact 10. Head codes have almost never been correctly shown in the TV series, with the few exceptions. 90% of the time, engines will have a single lamp on their right side, which is the head code for either mineral or empty wagon trains. Even when light engine, this head code still remains. The only other head codes that have been shown are perishable goods on Henry and more recently, express head codes on Gordon.
Fact 11. For years, people have abbreviated the Skarloey Railway as SKR. Not only is this wrong fictionally, but it's also wrong realistically. Unless the K is for a second word, why is it even needed? It's like referring to the Arsdale as ARR rather than AR.
And fact 12, the reason Edward is a larger seagull is because of Sodor's clients of that time. You see, Barrow-in-Furness was the first station past Vickerstown, the NWR's main headquarters at the time, so it would make the most sense for Bertram to loan engines from what was essentially the NWR's next door neighbour. I hope you found this video interesting, and if so, then make sure to leave a like. Be sure to check out Jackson's stuff if you haven't already. He's a big fan of my content and a very good friend too. We've been needing to do something together for quite a bit now, and with both of us being Railway Series oriented, this video is naturally the best way to go about it. Thanks Jackson for being a part of this. You've been watching Scrapyard Studios, and I will see you soon.